We are especially excited to bring together evaluation commissioners, funders and consultants, researchers, nonprofit leaders, and evaluators from across the field. Each of you bring a unique perspective, and we are looking forward to learning from one another during today's conversation. But before we get started, if you just joined us, we'd love to get a sense of who's joining us today. So please make sure you introduce yourself in the chat by sharing where you're joining us from and the area of evaluation or the organization that you work with. And I will go ahead and turn it over to, I believe it is Carlisle.
Yeah. Okay. Welcome. I'm Carlisle Levine. I am one of the co-leaders of the Strengthening Evaluation Contracting Partnerships initiatives with my colleague Hippolyte Pohl, who is also here present. And we're thrilled to have you with us today. We're thrilled to be co-hosting this webinar with Washington Evaluators. Our Strengthening Evaluation Contracting Partnerships initiative starts with the premise that evaluators who are proximate, that is proximate geographically, demographically, or in terms of issue area to an initiative or system that is being evaluated, have a better place to have unique, deep insights, understanding of the problems being addressed, and how best to learn about how they're being addressed. Our initiative seeks to influence how these partnerships with small and solo proximate evaluation firms are fostered and managed so that we can all benefit from the unique insights that proximate evaluators provide. But before we go any further, as you know, we're recording this session. If anyone has any issues with that, please either turn off your videos, change your name as you please. We'd like to find out a little bit about who's in the room. So Carolina, would you launch a poll so that we can just get a sense of who's here? We're interested in where you're located and the type of organization you work for. Just give you guys a moment to respond to that. Okay, I'm seeing a lot of the United States, which is what we'd expect, plus some Africa, Asia, and Europe. And then it looks like most people are here, but not everyone is from an evaluation firm or a consultant, some nonprofit, some foundation, government, field builders, academics, and other. Thank you for that poll. With that, Hippolyte, I'd like to turn it over to you to provide a little more background on SECPI.
Thank you so much, Carla, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone, and thank you very much for making time to be with us today. SECPI started in a very casual way. Carla and I had worked together for our organization before we split into private consultancies, and then we met working on similar projects or the same projects. As we did that, we shared notes on what was exciting us and what was frustrating us. And one of the things we shared in common was the fact that we found it difficult as small firms to get into some of the evaluation spaces because of the contracting practices that often surround such spaces. And so we said, well, why don't we share our experiences to see whether it's just the two of us who are in a unique position, or is there a general problem for small solo firms around the globe? And if so, can we initiate a conversation with those who fund, those who commission evaluations, and those who also conduct evaluations as large firms or mid-sized firms, to see if there's a way we can work together to create more conducive environments that allow small solo firms to bring in the unique perspectives that they have. Unique because they are located in communities, they have networks, they have access to networks, and they are culturally grounded, in most cases, and so can bring that to bear. So as we talked about that, we decided that the best way was to put that in writing. So we wrote a paper in 2021, basically making the case that No, this is what we see as frustrating, and we'll raise a number of points. We address that letter, open letter to funders and to commissioners of evaluations. And we were surprised to see the amount of interest that is generated. So that interest led us to then start organizing a series of workshops, webinars, to deepen the discussion, to broaden the issues, and bring in a lot more voices to speak on the topic. That evolved into several publications, several blogs, and we have continued that effort to date by having several initiatives that are ongoing. We have a gathering space where we bring in people who are into the evaluation working space to continue to dialogue on these issues that concern us. We are building a coalition as well, and then we are looking at reaching out to all organizations that are interested in this kind of topic. So we're very, very excited when the Washington Evaluation Association reached out to us and said, "Hey, we've heard about you. What is it you can share?" So we started talking and said, probably the best way would be to come together in this webinar where we'll have people who are either funders or working in that space who can share their experiences, with us and how they have worked successfully or unsuccessfully with the small solo firms, so that together, again, we can deepen that discussion and begin to find ways in which we can improve the space so that we can create more effective partnerships that allow the bigger firms, the smaller firms, the evaluation commissioners, and even the communities that we serve to have their voices all come on the table to make evaluation findings more useful to everyone. So this is the purpose of this meeting, creating space for the people in Washington Evaluation Association to share with us their lessons, and then we hear from all of you what do you think, and so that we can take this discussion forward. Thank you very much for coming. Carla, I hand over to you.
Thanks for that, Hippolyte. And we'll put some links in the chat if they're of interest. We have the great honor during this webinar to have some really fine speakers with us today. Rich Silver and Priya Singh from the Pew Charitable Trust, Alexandra Zizzer from RWJF. And they will say a little bit about what their firms are doing, but most importantly, they will be sharing their experiences creating contracting and selection processes that foster relationships with small solo evaluation firms. We will hold questions for the very end. We want to make sure that we have a presentation, plenty of time for small groups. But if you have questions as they're speaking, please put them in the chat. We'll be monitoring the chat for those questions, collecting them, and at the end, having a moment to address them. So, Rich, Priya, Alexandra, thank you so much for being with us today. I have a first question for you, and as you're answering your first question, happy to have you give 30 seconds on your organizations as well. So, Priya, let's start with you, and the question that we're going to start with, and if you wouldn't mind passing it to Alexandra from there, why is strengthening partnerships with small and solo proximate evaluation firms important to the Pew Charitable Trust?
Thank you, and thank you, SECPI and Washington Evaluators for having us. We're really happy to be part of this conversation today. So Pew is a nonprofit that uses research and evidence to help solve public problems. We work with policymakers, practitioners, researchers, and other partners to together tackle a wide-ranging and often complex issues, from public health to conservation, safety, and making more effective government. Evaluation has been part of Pew's DNA for more than 40 years. I think our CEO started in the unit. It's valued and it's kind of interwoven with our strategic planning. Among our team, one of our top priorities is finding the evaluation approach and the evaluators that are the best fit for the goals of the work. And that often means people who are closest to the topic, the place, the context. And for place-based initiatives in particular, it's really important to us to work with evaluators who understand the local environment, the relationships, the realities on the ground. We see that as supporting both equity and rigor in our evaluations. It helps us conduct stronger evaluations. It's also really important to us to work thoughtfully and responsibly. So we want a process that's equitable, that doesn't create unnecessary barriers for small or solo or proximate firms, and that doesn't filter out evaluators who might be the strongest fit for the project. We frequently work with small and mid-sized firms, and we've had really positive experiences with doing so. We see many benefits, like having that close expertise I just talked about. And also another one is having principals that are often directly involved throughout the life of the project that really provide a lot of continuity and leadership that we find valuable. So we approach this with humility, and we're really excited to have more conversations like this to learn how to do it better. And I'll pass it to Alexandra.
Great. Thank you, Priya. Hi, everyone. It's so wonderful to be here. Thank you, Carlisle and Hippolyte and Washington Evaluators for having us. So I am a program officer at the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, RWJF. We are a private foundation based in New Jersey, but we work nationally throughout the United States on health equity and social determinants of health work towards our mission of creating a future where health is no longer a privilege, but a right. So evaluation has also been a really important part of our work at RWJF for a long time. But over the past couple of years, we've made some intentional shifts as an organization, specifically to center equity and center community in our work. That's something we talked about a lot before, but we've made a lot of commitments and changes as an organization in the past 5 or 6 years towards that. We see partnerships with small and proximate evaluators as an essential and necessary part of that shift. As part of this change, we've moved towards directly funding more small community-based organizations or resident-led organizations instead of larger nonprofits, which is kind of how we would have worked in the past. We've also worked to redefine what rigor means to us and expand how we think about the methods we're using and who's centered in our evaluations and who's benefiting from them, who's able to use the information that is produced through our evaluations. And we've really found that small evaluation firms, local evaluation firms, solo evaluators are often better suited to join us in that kind of work. We find those folks are much more likely to be using innovative and equity-centered approaches and methodologies in their work. They likely already have meaningful relationships in their community and communities that they've worked in. They may have lived experience that relates to the work we're doing. And they really understand how to build trust, which is an essential part of doing work in this way. So for us at RWJF, strengthening those partnerships with you all, with those kinds of firms and evaluators, and making sure that there is meaningful room for you all in the field of evaluation is essential to what we want to be doing at RWJF and where we would like to see philanthropy go and more generally.
Alexandra, Priya, thank you. Alexandra, I'm going to toss this next question to you. So building on what you shared, which was super helpful, could you talk about how RWJF is approaching selecting and contracting evaluation firms so that you can build these stronger partnerships with the small local evaluation firms? Thank you very much.
Yeah, of course. So RWJF is a big organization, and our grant making and contracting processes were really built, before we made the shift I just talked about. They were built to facilitate working with large grantees and big evaluation firms. So we have really been learning over these past couple of years about how our processes work when we want to be working with small evaluation firms or solo practitioners. And what we've learned is that our standard contracting or RFP process is they often unintentionally favor kind of our usual suspects or large evaluation firms, especially those that have dedicated business development capacity built into the business. So we've done a couple of things to try and counteract this and making sure we have the opportunity to build relationships with new partners and smaller partners. So first of all, we try to be really intentional about proactively reaching out to smaller firms that we haven't worked with before, be intentional about making sure there's a diversity in type and size of organization that we're reaching out to about any given opportunity. Another practice that we've changed is around our RFPs and making sure they are as detailed as possible so that folks aren't disadvantaged if they don't have prior knowledge of how RWJF works, if they don't know how we talk about our work, or if they don't already know how any given project might connect to our larger strategies. And then finally, we try to make sure that our assessment criteria don't overemphasize previous philanthropic contracting experience or, more traditional quantitative rigor. So those are some of the practices that we've adapted in order to better work with and contract with smaller evaluation firms. We think they're working well, and we have been able to expand our universe of evaluators over the past couple of years. But it's not perfect. These are practice changes, not process changes. But I will say it has given us the opportunity to partner really closely with our evaluation partners before the evaluation work even begins. So working together to move through that process has actually been a benefit to relationship building and building trust early. So I will pass it to you, Priya.
Thanks, Alexandra. It's great to hear some of those. It's really helpful to hear how you all approach things too. One of our guiding sort of principles is that we try to keep the process low burden, our recruiting process, and we try to avoid asking prospective evaluators to do a lot of unpaid work. We take different approaches to recruiting, and we've used RFPs before. But we often start by talking with people in our networks, both within and outside of Pew, to get recommendations for evaluators with the right subject matter expertise or the right methodological expertise that we anticipate needing. And then we build out the list from there and do additional outreach and research as needed. And then we often use a tiered or phased process. So we'll share more detail as conversations progress, including trying to be transparent about how we collaborate with evaluators. So we might, in this approach, have an initial call where we get to know each other and make sure that the evaluators also understand how we work. And then we may share preliminary objectives and learning questions. And we, try to give a good understanding of what at that stage, knowing that we'll, look to the evaluators for their expertise, what at that stage we're really looking for and trying to accomplish with the evaluation, and ask them in a follow-up conversation to discuss their sort of high-level approach. And then we only seek, a formal proposal then once we've identified a finalist and are moving forward in good faith toward a contract. So that's a little bit about our process, and I'll pass it to my colleague Rich to talk a little bit more about it.
Thanks, Priya. I'm Rich Silver, and thank you to SECPI and the Washington Evaluators for the opportunity to speak with you all. So just I'll quickly add to what Priya already mentioned. We're usually evaluating policy change initiatives when we do commission evaluations with outside consultants, and we found it's important to have both evaluation and subject matter expertise on our consulting teams. And that subject matter expert role can be sort of another opportunity for working with individuals or small firms who are kind of closer to the sometimes very niche areas that Pew is involved in. But this also can sometimes mean pairing evaluators and subject matter experts who may not have worked together in the past. So we try to approach our recruitment process in a way that gives those potential collaborators a chance to assess the fit, make sure there's a good working relationship there. We realize there are, of course, kind of power dynamics at play, but we try to create a kind of transparent and approachable process that kind of gives everyone a chance to make sure that it's going to be a kind of good working relationship before we move forward with any kind of formal proposals or contracting steps. And we've done that in a number of different ways. We've sometimes done joint recruitment processes with evaluation firms to identify subject matter experts, or we've let them and sometimes take the lead in finding identifying potential consultants there. And I think Carlisle, back to you for the next question.
Okay, Rich, thanks a ton for that. And I will say I've been on the receiving end of your partnering process, and I think it's well done. I really appreciate it. Rich, following up on that, I'm sure you all have faced challenges in trying to adjust practices to be more welcoming of small proximate firms. And I wonder if you could speak to those.
Yeah, sure. So Pew is a large organization, and like many large organizations, there are a lot of administrative and kind of bureaucratic processes. And this is something that applies to our kind of contracting in general. It's not really anything unique to evaluation contracting. But in recent years, Pew has made a concerted effort to take a look at the contracting process and see where there could be more efficiencies. And part of that has involved moving towards more of a risk-based approach to our contracting. So engagements that are considered low risk, and usually our evaluations fall into that category, have sort of an easier path in our contracting process, and that's I think also made it easier to work with small firms or individuals. It's given us more flexibility in how we do our recruitment and selection process, how we kind of structure our budgets and statements of work, and there's less kind of compliance asks on our potential consultants. So for one example is lower, not as many asks for insurance requirements or financial disclosures. And that's, I think, opened up the process to other consultants. We're also always trying to make sure there's a fair and realistic alignment between the evaluation budgets we have available and what we ask for in our statements of work from our consultants. Sometimes I've acknowledged in the past the amount of sort of review and iteration on deliverables can sometimes catch consultants by surprise. And we acknowledge there are, of course, power dynamics at play there, but we want to try to be as transparent as possible on the front end of evaluations and when we're going through the contracting process to make sure that kind of expectations are clear, and that our budgets kind of reflect our kind of best estimate of what it will take to complete the work. But also, if things aren't going as planned, we try to preserve flexibility to kind of adjust along the way as needed, whether that might mean adjusting the scope or the budget if necessary. We're also continually working to kind of broaden our networks, since we do rely a lot on kind of referrals to potential evaluators. We're also trying to kind of break out of our kind of usual suspect circles, while also keeping hopefully the process accessible and as low burden as possible. So we've been trying to be more intentional about how we engage in new networks and professional spaces, Washington Evaluators being one of them. And in particular, since we do evaluate in a lot of sometimes niche subject matter areas, trying to connect with those networks that we anticipate we might be evaluating in the future to identify new opportunities to connect with consultants in those spaces. And I'll throw it back to Alexandra.
Thanks, Rich. Yeah, and a lot of what you're talking about in terms of challenges really resonates with me and what we experience at RWJF. I think, kind of as I alluded to in my previous answer, we are just a big organization and we have unwieldy processes that were not built. They were built for large evaluation firms and they were built for large grantees. We experienced similar problems or challenges, I should say, now that we're working with smaller grantees for, smaller community-based grantees versus the larger kind of well-resourced nonprofits. So definitely a challenge. And then similarly, another challenge, of course, is how do we find and build relationships with new partners, with small evaluation firms, with local firms, solo evaluators, especially, we work nationally, but we don't have a specific place emphasis. So any given project we're doing at RWJF, we might have varying levels of connection to that community or that region already. So how do we make sure that we are connecting with different folks and importantly, not just creating a new list of usual suspects that are just smaller evaluation firms? We want to make sure we're actually continuously meeting new people and having new conversations, not just moving from our kind of large firm roster to our small firm roster. So in addition to our internal practices, I think in terms of like, what are we doing to think through some of these challenges? In addition to the process changes and practice changes that I talked about before, we also have a body of grant making specifically related to evaluation field building. And some of that work does include supporting venues for evaluators and foundations to connect and build relationships. We support expanding the bench, which is an initiative that's meant to do that, specifically also promoting equitable evaluation principles. We also have an early stage pilot project that is around supporting small local firms and solo evaluators through the publishing process. So folks who might not have done that before or have the capacity themselves to help support them through the publishing process, which we think is important for a number of reasons, but also think that it is a good way to help foundations, philanthropy, contracting organizations and evaluators who are working in similar areas to find one another and see the overlap in work and opportunity for partnership. In terms of what, where we're going from here, internally, we're always talking about how we can make our processes and contracting more equitable and less burdensome for you all. Our budget process is a big one that we hear can be streamlined. So that's something that we're working on with our, my colleagues in our finance department. It's really a cross-collaborative effort. And my hope is that in the future, rather than just continually making tweaks to a process that wasn't really purpose-built for what we're doing now, we'll also be able to go back and rethink that whole process in a way that does better suit folks like you all and the folks that we want to be working with. And then again, at that higher level, our field building work also hopes to address a lot of these challenges more broadly by bringing more funders into this conversation and onto this journey to be engaging with these questions and these challenges. The field building work also includes supporting communities of practice and peer networks, opportunities for learning for smaller firms and practitioners, so that you all can be learning together, finding opportunities to collaborate, and overall increasing your visibility. I think the kind of top line message from me or things we're thinking about at RWJF, we just believe so strongly that you all are a necessary part of the field. And so we really are both internally and in our grant making work trying to build the conditions for you all to be thriving, engaged members of that field, as well as the big firms.
Alexandra, thanks. Priya, Rich, thanks. This has been, we really appreciate your willingness to come out in front of all of us, share your practices, what's working well, and where you're having room for improvement. Very generous on your parts, and it's really wonderful. Thank you everyone for the questions that you're putting in the chat. We're noting them, and we look forward to addressing them when we come back to plenary. But first, we're going to give you all a chance in small groups to talk among yourselves about what you've just heard from Alexandra and Rich and Priya, your own experiences, either as commissioners or as evaluation firms or related to them. What are your experiences in creating or being on the receiving end of selection and contracting practices that strengthen partnerships between commissioners and small firms? So we're going to invite our panelists to join small groups. They are not there to lead the small groups. They're there to participate just like everybody else, and we will have a chance again to ask them questions at the end. We are going to give you Google Slides. So we would love, if you have highlights from your conversation, we would love you to record them on Google Slides. Please remember your small group number and just use the slide related to that one. So the questions we're going to ask you to address what resonated with you from this conversation. For commissioners, what selection or contracting practices have you used to help welcome small proximate evaluation firms? And for evaluators who partner with commissioners, what practices have you experienced from commissioners that help to strengthen those partnerships? If you are not part of either of those groups, what have you observed or what are your reflections on this? So with that, we are going to give you 20 minutes in small groups. And Carolina is going to open up the small groups. We're going to randomly put you in groups of about 6. And so please join your small groups, and we will be around if you need technical support.
Oh, here we all come. All right, welcome back. Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back. So I hope you all had some very rich and engaging conversations in your breakout groups. We know that there were many great ideas shared, and while we won't have time to hear from every group, we'd love to capture some of the key themes that emerge. So as you share, feel free to reflect on what resonated most from today's discussion and any practices you've experienced or seen that help to create stronger partnerships. Please don't feel like you have to go through each and every question and answer them individually. We really want to hear with what resonated with your group the most. So who would like to go ahead and get us started? Any volunteers? I believe you can either raise your hand or come off mute because I can't see all the hands. Oh, I have one hand here. Okay, Kathleen.
Our group was made up of all evaluators. I think all, and like maybe all solo practitioners. I don't know that I could say that for sure, but we had a really good conversation. And I think the key themes that came out were, a lot of them were frustrations and some ideas about how we think some of these processes could be improved. Primarily around the idea that a solo firm has to take on the responsibility to staff up, which was a term someone used I really loved, to respond to an RFP, right? We may bring really specific expertise and content expertise, but when an RFP is sort of double loaded, right? You have to be able to do qualitative and build a dashboard. What is the foundation's perspective on, well, let us help you find a partner, or let's have a process where we can find the best people to do both parts of that work. And I think the other is really involving evaluators up front in designing some of these processes, and even evaluation proposals or evaluation plans. I think the third point that we really talked about is this question about how do we build relationships with funders, and how do we navigate when funders or foundations are not quite to the evolved state where we're hearing that RWJF and Pew are, right? Because not everyone, really not a lot of them are.
Okay. Okay, thank you for that. Do we have anyone else that would like to share before we hear from our panelists in response to?
Yeah, Keisha. Oh, sorry, Stan, do you want to go?
All right, I was just basically going to say funding, the politics, and outcome measures. Again, I'm a peer reviewer for the Council on Accreditation, and you have to meet a standard PQI, and there's a big emphasis on program logic models. And I would not want to tell you how many times I go in to review the organizations and have absolutely positively no idea how to do a program logic model. All right, so like outcome measures and again funding, like who is within the organizations, who are the ones responsible for to work with you in the evaluation piece. And part of the problem is that very often organizations, when they look to defund, the first thing that they're usually defunding is people who are involved in the evaluation component.
Yep.
And that becomes a very serious. But again, if anybody's looking for an opportunity, go to Social Current and you see all the organizations that they accredit. And if you are an expert on program logic models, go there.
Yes. I happen to love logic models too myself. I know not everybody does. Okay. Let's see. If there are no other, because I don't see any other hands raised, we can perhaps get to some of the questions that were raised in the chat. So why don't we start from the first question that was entered in there by Michelle. Michelle's question is, many communities, indigenous, Hmong, etc., that we work with have been doing evaluations since their existence. However, there's a chronic lack of formally trained evaluators. Our work builds those folks internally while doing the requested work. Do you include capacity building in your selection process? And anyone can answer that, or any of our panelists.
I can start because this came up a little bit in the breakout group that I was in. So part of the evaluation field building work that I mentioned during the panel does include thinking about Indigenous research and evaluation methods, recognizing that folks have their own practices for understanding what's going on in their communities and developing solutions and determining whether those solutions are being effective or not. Mm-hmm. And that those practices are not traditionally recognized as rigorous or scientific. So we are working on a couple of things, like changing that perception, first of all, and recognizing that actually these are very rigorous methods because they're relevant to the communities that we're working in. Doing some work to formalize the methods a little bit. So kind of what you're talking about with the capacity building. And I don't mean formalize in like a master's program or anything like that, but like writing them down even, or like documenting how they work and what the thinking is behind them. And then, so that's work we're doing. The thing I will say is for us at RWJF, that work is super emergent because we have not been built to do that kind of work traditionally. We do not have, we have not historically had a focus on Indigenous communities. We do not have staff representation from very many Indigenous communities. And what we have learned is to engage that work, we have to be so slow and intentional because there's a lot of risk of us doing harm in the process. So it is something we're thinking about. It is something we're working on. It is slow. I don't have an answer for you right now. It's not to speak specifically to the question. It is not necessarily like a box we have in our assessment when selecting for an evaluator, But in general, we see it as a benefit when an evaluation is not extracting from a community, whether it's an Indigenous community or not, but also bringing either information or skills or capacity building as well. So that is something that we think about and look for. But the Indigenous space specifically is so emergent for us that that's a little fuzzier still.
All right, thank you. And the next question here is from Jessica. I have seen some foundations require a local evaluator on the team. I think this is done with the intention to be supportive of local small evaluators. However, the financial reality for the local evaluator is they have a very small amount for the work, which makes it difficult to sustain their efforts. When consultant teams are formed, do you give consideration to the percentage amount that should go to the local evaluator?
I can say a little bit about how we approach this with Pew in our evaluations. Usually when we are we need to supplement a team with usually it's a niche kind of subject matter expertise role that might be subcontracted through a primary evaluation firm. We're working closely with the whoever would be the primary contractor to kind of define what those roles and responsibilities are at the kind of very beginning of a contract process. So if we haven't had someone already identified, we're kind of defining what that part of the scope of work would look like with them and collaborating very closely on that kind of recruitment process. So and we hope we've scope the budget to reflect the realities of kind of what's needed for that role, but it's usually not something that's kind of just left to the kind of primary consultant to do on their own. We're very closely involved in that selection and recruitment process.
All right, thank you. The next question we have here is from Stan. Do you use AI in determining contracts? Interesting.
I also want to add in additional context from Dr. Taha that came in later that also asks about AI, which is if yes, are you seeing any challenges with how AI is changing grant proposal assessments when you are reviewing those evaluator proposals or tender responses?
I can say for Pew, at least in our evaluation contracts, no. Even when we have done RFPs, we usually don't, but it really hasn't been in the last couple of years that we've done an RFP. So the kind of just the AI presence and ubiquitousness of it, we haven't really dealt with that through in when we've done an RFP yet. So it's not something we've kind of wrestled with as a unit yet. Yeah, short answer, no, we haven't.
Good.
Yeah.
Priya, you're going to add something too? Oh, yes. Go ahead, Alexandra.
Priya, you jump in if you.
I was just briefly going to say that when we, since a lot of our, when we're not doing an RFP, a lot of it is through kind of conversation, getting to know folks and getting to understand, also trying to use open questions to understand so that in case our the criteria we sort of outline for what we think we need are too narrow, that we leave space for that through the conversation. So it's the only thing I was going to add. Thanks so much, Alexandra, over to you.
Yeah, so similarly, the short answer is no, we are not using AI in contract or grant selection processes. I haven't been a part of an open call or an RFP evaluation process recently. I will say we did just do a grant call for proposals and we received about 2,000 proposals. And that was the first time I heard anyone say, should we be thinking about how AI could help us with like the screening stage? So it's something where it's been mentioned as an organization. I would not say like I am not receiving any instructions or sense from our leadership that integrating AI into our work is like an important thing that we're going to be doing. We have access to Microsoft Copilot and folks use that, but there's not really a formalized version. We do the kind of biggest AI thing I've seen on our website, rwjf.org. We did build an AI tool to interact with our research, our published research that we funded. So you can go on there and ask questions and it'll pull up findings and information based on the research we published, but that's kind of the only place that we've gone into AI in like a formalized way as an organization that I'm aware of, at least.
And we have about 2 minutes before we have to start wrapping up, or 1 minute now. But Carlisle, I think we can fit in one more question maybe before we, okay. So we'll get to this one more question, and any questions that were not answered, our panelists have agreed to do their best to go back and we can get you an answer to your question. So this question is from Linda. When independent evaluation consultants attempt to initiate new relationships with foundations, what would be the type of role on the foundation side that the consultant should contact to establish a connection?
May I also add, sorry, that some of the questions afterward are very similar to the question that I asked. So maybe you could probably, address those questions while still answering one.
Thank you for that question. I think I imagine it must vary, but at Pew, I would say, and Rich, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this too, but I would say that our evaluation and learning unit, because we're trying to expand our reach and how we find people, and so we're really the ones kind of in charge of recruiting and figuring out who we work with.
Yeah, it's easy for Pew. We're the ones, or anyone with our title.
Yeah, so similarly at RWJF, I sit on our research evaluation and learning team. So I think to try and maybe generalize an answer to your question, at a foundation in general, if you can determine whether they have some sort of evaluation team, learning team, like someone who focuses in that, that's a good starting place. At RWJF, I think our programmatic program officers are also not a bad idea. If you find a program officer at a foundation who's doing work that really is similar to what you're doing, that can be a good connection. They might have the ability to contract an evaluator directly, or they may know who to send you to in the organization. And lastly, and I think this gets at one of the questions later in the chat, but this came up in my small group as well. I think getting to know, having connections with the grantees and organizations that funders are working with is also a good way, like a good entry point or a way to be connected. We often ask our grantees who they know and who they've worked with and think they could, would be a good choice for an evaluation. I can't say if everyone's doing that, but that would be another potential thing to explore.
All right, thank you. Thank you. And so now I'm going to turn it back over to Hippolyte and Carlisle.
Thank you so much to everyone for very enlightening and uplifting discussions that we've had in the groups and in the plenary. We wish we had more time to answer all the questions, very interesting questions that have been posed. We will try to see if the panelists can pick up some of those questions and ask them, and probably. Usually we also write a blog post after our webinars, so some of these questions may get answered if we get to write a blog post, so that we share that again back to you. Thank you very much. You can continue to engage with SECPI and what we do through the various channels that we've opened. So we have a gathering space meeting twice a month where everybody can come and share ideas on topics like this. If you have a burning topic that you would like us to discuss, please bring it forward. If you want to be able to lead a discussion as well, as we had Pew and RWDFC do today, please feel free to let us know. We'll create space for you to share some of the experiences that you have, some of the lessons you've learned, and some of the ways in which you have advanced this agenda further. We're also building a coalition, that would help to champion these ideas. Again, feel free to join that. We'll have the adverts out and we'll all share it via our website and our links. So feel free to join that as well. As I mentioned, we'll do blogs, especially after webinars. Feel free to engage with the blogs and the discussions. We are planning other events that will come in. We have a research that we are working on right now, which is the hidden curriculum, where we're trying to understand what is it that the big firms know about how to win and keep contracts that the small firms don't know, because of so we're doing research on that, and we'll be sharing the results. We hope you'll be part of that discussion as well as we go on. Yeah. So thank you very much for being part of this, and feel free to contact Carla or I. And we have our website. You can go to our website. You'll find information that we posted there. The recordings of this webinar we posted there as well. We have a LinkedIn page that you can also follow, to see more about this. We have another webinar that we are planning later this period before the end of the year. We hope to bring in one of the big firms to speak to us on some of the issues and how they have been dealing with them. We'll let you know when that comes up. But do keep in touch, and I hand over back to Caroline. Thank you.
We're going to hand it to Washington Evaluators for our closing.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for joining us today on behalf of Washington Evaluators. We are grateful for our panelists from Pew and Robert Wood Johnson Foundation for their candor, and importantly, to you all for your candor as well about the difficulties and challenges you are navigating in this field. Conversations like these are exactly what our community is here to foster. We are proud to co-host events like this with SECPI, and we do hope that you'll stay connected to both of our organizations. As mentioned, please check out SECPI's upcoming gathering space and resources at secpi.org, and keep an eye on washingtonevaluators.org for more opportunities to learn and connect with your fellow evaluators. Thank you all for your time today, and we look forward to seeing you in the future.